Until the End, Part 5. Lyra's heart was wrenching at the thought of the night. She couldn't focus on anything properly, with every corner of her thoughts filled with memories of her and Bonbon, and every fibre of her being craving her hugs again. Furious with herself, she levitated the knife back over to her neck, but couldn't bring herself to go any further than cutting a space big enough for a drop of blood to escape. She threw it aside again, and got up, intent on making the pain go away, walking into another room. Bonbon was about to approach Ponyville Station. After that, she had to get across town to the house she and Lyra shared. She shed her share of tears, remembering that amazing night Lyra and her had shared, praying that Lyra would be waiting for her when she got back, just so that she could feel her touch again and apologise for everything. The sun started to make its descent as the train announced the 8-minute warning. Lyra had entered a supply closet in the spare room of the house and found a lengthy inch-thick rope. Lyra didn't focus on the length, knowing what she was going to use it for only made her want to throw it away. She stumbled back into the main room of the building and looked up at the light bolted into the ceiling. She closed her eyes and grimaced at the thought of what was coming, while she used her magic to the only available extent she could tie the rope to the light. She stood there for a moment, unwilling to move. The train carrying Bonbon finally pulled into the station, and Bonbon wasted no time in running off of it and speeding into town. Lyra looked at all the wooden remains of the bench, and without any more thought, she used her magic to fashion them into a tall wooden object, hardly capable of supporting herself, though in her state it was out of her ability. Lyra forced the end of the rope hanging down to knot into a loop, large enough to put a watermelon through, letting it hang loose. She levitated herself up with a large amount of concentration that her mind was reluctant to allow her, and placed herself above the poorly structured wooden frame, and levitating the loop around her neck, pulling the knot towards her spine by capturing it in her magic as best she could until it began to sting around her throat. For fuck's sake. Bonbon could see the house in the distance and kept hoping that her beloved Lyra would still be waiting for her. Lyra let more tears shed, holding the whole structure together with her magic. Bonbon approached the window to the main room, but upon looking through the wide space in the blinds, was horrified to see Lyra standing on a large wooden frame with a rope around her neck. Without a second thought, she called out to her. "Lyra, no!" she screamed, running for the front door. Lyra's ears perked up. Could that have been Bonbon? Lyra's sudden change in attention led her to forget about holding her magic focus, and the foundation of wood holding her up quickly smashed beneath her. Failing to snap her leg like Lyra had hoped, and the noose would work, she was suspended in the middle of the air from the floor to the roof, choking, oh for fuck's sake, and frantically throwing her hooves around trying to escape. Really? Bonbon bashed on the door as hard as possible, but it wouldn't open. Not willing to be held back by the object, she furiously threw her body at it with an almighty shove and galloped into the main room, but discovered she was too late. The support frame had fallen, and she frantically began to look around for something tall enough to put under her legs, but nothing was in sight. Bonbon, desperate to save her fast-dying love, threw herself under her and stood on her back hooves, using her forehooves to support Lyra as best she could, only to discover from sputters and coughs that the rope was too tight for it to matter how high or low Lyra was suspended. Lyra continued to frankly dig at the rope with her hooves. All that flashed through her mind as everything above her neck started to feel numb was regret. Regret that she had let her own selfish depression ruin everything. Oh. Bonbon, I'm sorry, she tried to choke out, but it hardly sounded like weak sputters. Lyra, don't give up on me now. I need you to stay with me, Bonbon said, continuing to hold her up, hoping it would make a difference in the pressure on her neck. But Lyra could feel that the knot had tightened up more and clamped around her throat, letting hardly any air out. Bonbon desperately thought of things she could do to save her. She spotted a knife in the corner of the room. Hold on, Lyra, she said, gently lowering her before running off to grab the knife. Lyra continued to try and get air into her lungs, but she was almost beyond the point where it would matter. She felt as if every vein on her face was bulging while they stung her with pain. Her vision started to blur as her eyes became filled with the horrible bloodshot lines spanning through them. Bonbon stood right in front of Lyra, and with the best possible aim she could manage under the stress, flicked her head and tossed the knife. As if blessed with the luck of a Mark's mare, she struck the rope at the base of the lie where it hung down, just enough to sever it on the thread. Lyra continued to choke and hardly noticed what was happening. Her vision had blurred completely, and she could taste blood and smell it in her sinuses. The whole situation was the most painful, displeasuring experience. The foul taste was gargling in her throat, unable to descend down her squeezed throat. The rope started to give away under Lyra's weight on its thread still remaining, and just as Lyra thought she was finished, the rope snapped, and Bonbon raced under Lyra and caught her, laying her back to a comfortable position. The sudden jolt snapped enough attention to Lyra to give her a few more seconds of life, as unpleasant as it remained. Bonbon noticed that even now nothing pulled the rope. It was still choking her. Acting on instinct, Bonbon raced over to the knife, grabbing it before very carefully returning and cutting the rope behind Lyra's neck. Using her hooves to further part it as she neared the base. Lyra felt relief as the strain on her neck was parted, and she gasped for breath of air, but her throat was horribly damaged, and the blood in her airway restricted a large amount of air, or was carried down with what did make it through. Her vision barely returned, and Lyra started to feel cold. She began to cough up large amounts of blood, and her aqua shade started to whiten. Oh my god. Bonbon laid her mare's friend head on her lap and sat next to her, stroking her mane. Tears were pouring out of her eyes. She'd never seen Lyra in a more sickening condition, and never imagined such a state would befall someone so beautiful. Lyra, it's okay. You're going to be okay, Bonbon said comfortingly, trying to reassure herself and Lyra that everything would be okay. I'm so sorry. I should never have left you. Lyra, through all her pain, started to paint a vague image of Bonbon's face above her. Tears started to fill her eyes, but they came out red, as if filled with blood. She choked out a sentence as she grew colder, hoping Bonbon would understand her. It's not your fault, Lyra choked, sputtering blood everywhere as she spoke. No, Lyra, it is. This wouldn't have happened, Bonbon cried, understanding her perfectly. Lyra weakly raised her hoof in the air, and Bonbon grabbed it in her own immediately. She could feel in her leg how cold she was. She was almost gone. I love you, Bonbon. Don't blame yourself. Together. Till the end. Lyra finished, requiting the vow they had made on that night of their fondest memory. Bonbon kept holding Lyra's arm, speechless as it went limp. The only sound that filled the room was a faint hiss of air leaving Lyra's cold, lifeless body. It took Bonbon almost 2 minutes to realise what had just happened. 2 minutes to try and figure out if she was having a nightmare, or if her mare friend had really just died in her arms. She was unable to voluntarily move. With her body involuntarily shaking, Lyra's cold body hissed and let small dribbles of blood run down her chin onto Bonbon's hooves. Something inside her snapped before the unbearable, depressing truth hit her. Lyra? She asked, shaking her limp body. Lyra! She called out, shaking her body harder. Lyra! Lyra! No! Lyra, please don't leave me! Lyra! She screamed, her own tears mixing into the blood on the floor. Together till the end. The end doesn't have to be now, Lyra, she screamed again, holding her mare friend's head to her chest and cradling her while she cried. Why? Lyra! Bonbon cried, feeling her own body go limp on top of Lyra's. Bonbon cried for what felt like hours to her. The pain and distress never seemed to end. It wasn't until she lifted her head up that she saw a gleam in the corner of the room. Focusing through the watered, blurred vision she had currently been left with, Bonbon saw the knife she cut Lyra down to the ground level with. Bonbon couldn't think straight as she watched the gleaming metal, tempting her to make the pain end. She looked down at her dead love and back at the knife. Still shaking, she brought herself to walk over to the knife and picked it up in her mouth. Oh. Before walking back to Lyra's still laying body, she dropped next to her and looked from her to the knife several times before she stopped, looking directly at the blade she held between her hooves. Together till the end," she said before bringing the knife to her throat. The end.